Now that you've got the basics out of the way, we're going to talk about some other highlights you need to know about. Firstly though, let's talk about how to get to Africa. It's remarkably simple. Your major entry points into Africa are going to be Johannesburg, the hub of southern Africa, down in the south, and Nairobi, the capital of Kenya, up in the east. Getting there is very easy, whether it be through a Middle Eastern airline, an Australian airline, or an Asian airline. The distance isn't great, and the networks are quite vast. It may be worth considering in the future a trip to Europe via Johannesburg. It's quite simple to add on a different sort of stopover rather than the usual Asian stopover. Another thing to remember is the size of Africa and how that factors into your air travel. A flight from Nairobi to Johannesburg sounds quite simple on paper, but when the distance is the same as Sydney to Perth, it does add up in terms of time. If you're doing an East African trip and you wanted to visit Victoria Falls down in the south, a simple flight sounds fine. Unfortunately, it's going to take you 3 days almost to get there. Now, 3 days travel for 3 days in Victoria Falls doesn't sound like a smart option. Therefore, we generally keep East Africa and Southern Africa completely separate trips. And once people go to Africa, they will want to go back again. So let's save some of it for the second trip. If they want to see a safari, Cape Town and Victoria Falls, that's Southern Africa. And that can be in any order. If they want to see the old school safari and maybe the gorillas, that's East Africa. And we keep them separate for that reason. There are a few highlights and places you will need to know. You do need to know the Serengeti and the Masai Mara, both in Tanzania and Kenya respectively. This is home to the Great Migration, and they're very famous names of national parks. Lake Nakuru is right near Nairobi, which is the capital of Kenya. Amboseli National Park is right on the border next to Kilimanjaro. And just next to the Serengeti in Tanzania, Ngorongoro Crater. Don't try and spell it, we'll provide that for you. In Southern Africa, you need to know about Cape Town, obviously if you don't already. Kruger National Park, Victoria Falls, and the two which are new to most people, Chobe National Park and the Okavango Delta. A delta is essentially a clean swamp, is a nice way of thinking about it. And the delta is the largest inland delta in the world. To recap really quickly, Serengeti, Masai Mara, Lake Nakuru, Ngorongoro Crater, Amboseli, all up in the east. Down in the south, Cape Town, Kruger National Park, Victoria Falls, Chobe National Park, and the Okavango Delta. If you know those 10 things, you're well on your way to being an expert.